Another 31 Canadians have been able to leave Gaza via the Rafah border crossing Thursday, Canada's ambassador to Egypt told CTV News. This brings the total number of Canadians evacuated from Gaza to 106. It comes 2 days after the first group of 75 Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families left Gaza, and 1 day after no foreign nationals were able to pass through the key crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip because it had closed. Officials said Tuesday those making the crossing will be heading to Cairo and then on to Canada. While in Cairo, Canada is providing accommodation, food, and basic necessities. Egypt's government is allowing those who cross from Gaza to stay in the country for a maximum of 3 days, according to federal officials. Ambassador Louis Jumet said of the 40 Canadians who were on the list of approved names Thursday, he can confirm 31 were eventually able to leave. He further said that the federal government works tirelessly every day to get Canadians out of Gaza. The White House today said Israel has agreed to put in place 4-hour daily humanitarian pauses in its assault on Hamas in northern Gaza starting on Thursday, as the Biden administration said it has secured a second pathway for civilians to flee fighting. US President Joe Biden had asked Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to institute the daily pauses during a Monday call. US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that the Israelis had committed to announcing each 4-hour window at least 3 hours in advance. Biden also told reporters that he had asked the Israelis for a pause longer than 3 days during negotiations over the release of some hostages held by Hamas, though he ruled out chances of a general ceasefire. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had warned Israel last week that it risked destroying an eventual possibility for peace unless it acted swiftly to improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza for Palestinian civilians as it intensifies its war against Hamas. French President Emmanuel Macron has opened a Gaza aid conference on Thursday with an appeal for Israel to protect civilians, saying that all lives have equal worth and that fighting terrorism can never be carried out without rules. Crowds of Palestinian families stretching as far as the eye could see walked off out of Gaza City and surrounding areas towards the south Thursday to escape Israeli strikes and ground troops battling Hamas militants in dense urban neighborhoods. Others joined tens of thousands taking shelter at the city's biggest hospital not far from the fighting. Gaza's largest city is the focus of Israel's campaign to crush Hamas following its deadly October 7 incursion, and the Israeli military says Hamas's main command center is located in and under the Shifa hospital complex. The militant group and hospital staff deny that claim. Growing numbers of people have been living in and around the hospital complex, hoping it will be safer than their homes or UN shelters in the north, several of which have been hit repeatedly. Israeli troops were around 3 kilometers from the hospital, according to its director. The accelerating exodus to the south came as Israel agreed to put in place 4-hour daily humanitarian pauses and to open a second route for people to flee the north, the White House said. The scope of the pauses was not immediately clear. The agreement came as Western and Arab officials gathered in Paris on Thursday to discuss ways of providing more aid to civilians in Gaza. Separately, mediators worked on a possible deal for a 3-day ceasefire in exchange for the release of around a dozen hostages held by Hamas, according to 2 Egyptian officials, a United Nations official, and a Western diplomat. The trickle of aid entering Gaza from the south is largely barred from going north, which has been without running water for weeks. The UN Aid Office said all the bakeries there have shut down for lack of fuel, water, and flour. Hospitals running low on supplies are performing surgeries without anesthesia. More than 2/3 of Gaza's population of 2.3 million have fled their homes since the war began, with many heading Israeli orders to flee to the southern part of the besieged enclaves. After a month of relentless bombardment in Gaza since the Hamas attack has killed more than 10,800 Palestinians, nearly 2/3 of them women and minors, according to the health ministry in the Hamas-run territory. More than 2,300 others are believed to have been buried by strikes that in some cases have demolished entire city blocks. Israeli officials say thousands of Palestinian militants have been killed and blame civilian deaths on Hamas, accusing it of operating in residential areas and using Palestinian civilians as human shields. Gaza's health ministry does not distinguish between civilians and combatants in its casualty reports. More than 1,400 people have died in Israel since the start of war, most of them civilians killed by Hamas. Israel says 32 of its soldiers have been killed in Gaza since the ground offense began.
IPTV.